We've got startling new numbers tonight on student debt delinquencies. It turns out the problem is much worse than previously thought. The St. Louis Fed finds nearly 1 in 3 Americans are at least 1 month behind on their payments. 1 in 3. That's nearly double the rate the Education Department reports. So should taxpayers be concerned? Because we're going to pick up the tab after all. We've got new advice tonight from Kal Chany, founder and president of Campus Consultants. He is the author of the Princeton Reviews. This is a decent read. Pick it up. Paying for college without going broke. Kal, welcome back to the show. So how do we not know this? This is totally different from what the federal government reports.
Well, the problem is with the math. In other words, if you're going...
It's not a problem. I think it's more accurate than what the Fed's reporting.
Right. The difference in the percentages is that in the Department of Ed, they're looking at the total number of borrowers. And that can include, of course, students in school who aren't in repayment yet on their loans.
Who aren't even making
payments. Who are about 45% of the borrowers. But 55% of the borrowers are paying off their loans. So if you look at how many are in default, that number, and divide it by the number of students in repayment, the percentage is much higher than the Department of Education's figures.
So it's a fascinating new number and shows you just how bad this really is. I got to tell you, what do we do? I mean, this is staggering that this many people are behind. And once you're behind 1 month, you're going to be behind 2 months and 3 months. And I think just forgiving this debt, as the president wants to do, is not the right answer.
Right. That's probably not going to do it. But families, what can families do? That's the important thing now, because kids are going to go. No, they need to be careful in terms of the borrowing.
Yes.
Just having the idea that I'm going to borrow the money and somehow it's all going to work out fine in the end. That's, of course, the colleges may be saying just borrow, come, because they need to fill the classrooms. But it's a good rule of thumb that you should not leave school with your credential owing more than your first year starting salary.
That would be a great rule of thumb, and you've said it here before. So plan on your debt being no more than what you'll earn in that first year at work. Great advice. Let's talk a little bit about some more details in these numbers that I found compelling. Apparently, the people with the least amount of debt are the least likely to pay. Why?
Well, the numbers there, because that could be students who drop out of school. You know, the experts will say the worst thing to do, the only thing worse than not going to college, than going to college and having debt is coming out, is not going to school at all. I'm sorry, the worst thing to do is that. But actually, the worst thing to do is to incur debt and not get your degree, because you're not getting the wage premium based on the credential, so you're worse off than the student that didn't go to school at all. So that's why, again, if you've got to have a plan to finish the degree, and not just say, I'll worry about the first year and then I'll figure out later how I'm going to get through.
I want to offer other advice here that I know you've said many times, even on this show, which is that, you can look at that sticker price, but that's not necessarily what you're going to have to pay, and you should try to negotiate that number lower. And we know schools all over the country are doing that every single day. Right.
This is the time now before May 1 when high school seniors are deciding pretty much where they're going to go. And that's where their strongest bargaining position is in terms of dealing with the schools to appeal the packages. But again, you want to be careful with the loans. It's easy to say, well, we'll just borrow. But if you're borrowing so much money, especially if you're going with the private loans on top of the federal aid loans, that can be a real problem.
At some point, we have to talk about what the schools can do, what the colleges can do, the universities can do, because we're starting to see schools fail. Sweetbriar closing its doors. It's been around for over 100 years. This was a venerable institution, well known in the South, in Virginia, and it's not around anymore, and I think there are going to be more failures. Do you believe that?
Right. There will be some shakeout with that with some schools, and that's where they're getting price resistance at the colleges. A lot of people are just saying, is it worth the money to go? And certainly it is worth going to college. It's rare to be the Jordan Spieth.
You've got to control what you pay.
Right. You have to. That's up for the families to do that and not just assume, well, the school's saying this is good, come here. You have to slam the doors.
It's like a bank loan officer. A bank loan officer will underwrite you a loan for whatever, right? But you're the one who has to say, I'm not taking that huge loan. I'm going to take something I can afford.
Right. And that was a concern about the defaults in New York, that the defaults is higher, the percentage now on student loans than on credit card debt.
All right, Kal. Thanks for coming on the show tonight. Great job as always.